Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem. B'Shem Irgin Shirter, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Harav Yakov Zev Smith Shlita on Emasai Ein Mitzvahs and Siyas Kapayim, challenging duchaning questions. To have the great source sponsoring your shir, call Irgin Shirter 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Harav Smith.
A year and a half ago on Simchas Torah we had the following shaila that I made a note. We're going to give a shir about this one day. A tzibur davened and they didn't have a Kohen. And usually Simchas Torah duchan by Shacharis. So the first question, should they look for a Kohen? Is tircha de tzibur? If they don't have it, no, the pata. The Ma'aser, they found a Kohen who davened in an early minyan, and he drank a revius of grape juice. The question is, could he duchan? If he could duchan, does he make a bracha and duchan for them also? But the fourth question was, he didn't want to duchan for them because he drank, he felt uncomfortable. By Mincha, they daven Mincha right after Mussaf. Some people don't, but they daven Mincha right after Mussaf. So they had an idea, they'll have this Kohen duchan for them by Mussaf. By Mincha, I'm sorry, because already he was after a kofis. So it really has a 4-question in one as far as duchaning. But recently, what prompted me to give this share now, a bach from the yeshiva asked me, he lives in Flatbush, right next to the yeshiva Yad Yosef, and he's a Kohen, and he thought of an idea, he'll go every day and daven with them, and duchan and make a bracha with them. Is he allowed to do that? So the emphasis, duchaning for us is a novelty, us in Laarez. In Eretz, duchaning is a daily question. They duchan every day, I tell the Baruch, you have to get up on time here in America, because don't forget, when you go to Eretz Yisroel, and you're a Kohen, if you sleep late, you also miss the mitzvah derais of duchaning. So you're playing with fire by missing a Shacharis. But basically, as the Charedim writes, the mitzvah of duchaning is on the Kohen and on the Yisroel. So this is a question for all of us, and as we'll see, some beautiful shaila. It's really about the nature of Nesiyas Kapayim. And I think if we have to reduce the yesod for today into one simple question, we have very many different mitzvahs, Baruch Hashem. We're zocheh to some mitzvahs that are basically a whole day. You can wear tefillah a whole day, tzitzis, sukkah, morning and night. Some mitzvahs are one per day per customer. For example, davened minim. Person has a beautiful davened minim and makes a bracha, and then he finds a nicer one. He can't make a bracha on another davened minim. It's one per day. Ner Chanukah is one per day. What's the nature of the mitzvah of Nesiyas Kapayim? Is it one per day? Then how could a Kohen duchan again for a different tzibur? Maybe it's even less than that. Maybe it's like the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKan. It's also the Raisa, but there's no chiyuv to look for a kan. If you find it, you do it. There's no mitzvah to go shecht. If you want to eat, you have to shecht. So maybe the late sleeper, by him, in his warped mentality, sleeping is better than duchaning, maybe he's not even over, because he wasn't in shul when they're duchan. The nafkamina will be all of our shaylas plus many more. So I think maybe we could reduce to the simple question, is Nesiyas Kapayim a mitzvah chiyuvis every day, whenever you have the opportunity? Is it a mitzvah kiyumis, when you do it, good, if you don't do it, it's also good? Can you do it a second time? So the truth is, the source of Nesiyas Kapayim, as we know, is the psukim in Parshas Nasai, Kaisavarchas b'nei Yisroel emor lahem, where the Torah is mitzvah kohen to duchan. And there's no doubt about it, all the minyan mitzvahs agree, this is one of the Taryag mitzvahs b'li safek. The chiddush here is, the Gemara makes a statement that's sort of a paradox. And Saitel Amid Chesed Amid Beis, Kol kohen she'eino oil duchan, oiva b'sholosh asay. If he doesn't duchan, it's not just one asay of emor lahem, it's 3 asay. Kaisavarchu, emor lahem, and v'samo shmiel b'nei Yisroel. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean there are 3 asay. It's only one of the Taryag mitzvahs. So the Shulchan Aruch words it very carefully in Kuf Chav Ches Siv Beis. If he's not oil duchan, he's mevatel an asay. Ka'oiva b'sholosh asay. Mr. Burr explains, it's really one asay. But the Rebbeinu Shalom gave an extra emphasis as if there's 3 asays. And you're wondering, what's pshat? There's one that say, why does the Baruch say it 3 different times? So I think the pshat is, and it's important for all of us to hear this, especially we're looking forward to a week of Duchaning. The Gemara says in Soit L'Amechesem Abay is a powerful statement. Minayin shekadosh baruch hu mis'ave lebirchas kehanim. How do you know that the Baruch Shem longs and has a taiva that we should make birchas kehanim? The Gemara brings a pasuk. Now we know Kadosh Baruch Hu mis'ave l'tvashim zal tzadikim. Kadosh Baruch Hu mis'ave shetiyu meilim b'Torah. But the Baruch Shem is mis'ave for duchaning. Like why? So maybe the pshat is pashit. Who like the Baruch Shem knows the potential of a duchaning? You know, the Baruch Shem created the world just to be meitiv, to give us, provide us. The greatest, most guaranteed way of giving bracha, zok the chinuch and shinayin ches, is duchaning. Because the kehanim are the conduit, they are the means, but really the Baruch Shem is giving the bracha. The Baruch Shem is giving the bracha through the kehanim. And just like you could understand, a loving father just wants to give his son and provides for his son. And you ever watch a father saying goodbye to his ben yachid that's going to camp? It's painful. He says, my kid, please eat a lot. Remember, eat a lot. Okay. He's going for the steps. Don't forget, make sure you have a great time. Eat a lot. The bus is pulling out. Don't forget, eat a lot. That's mitoich ahava, right? The Baruch Shem has an ahava to us, ava rab aftanu. And he knows how much it benefits us if we get the bracha. So he just says it over and over. Bench them. The Kohen give the bracha. The Yisroel, like the Sefardim says, stand there with attention, with achna. It's pashut, an expression of the ahava. The Baruch Shem knows the potential of a bracha, so he repeats it. Kipshutai, that's an expression of ahava. And then you can understand, Taka, like I mentioned, what the Sefardim writes in Perek Daled, in mitzvah say Tlois Pe Ois Yud Ches. He says there's a mitzvah on the Kohen to bench the Eden, and there's a mitzvah on the Yisroel to receive the bracha. What do? You stand there b'shtika and kavana. Now it's not clear if the Sefardim means it's actually a kiyah mitzvah deraisa on the Yisroel to be gebenched, or they are messiah the Kohen. But in either case, it's enough to feel that this mitzvah is a shutfis. Kohen has to duchan, and the Eden have to do whatever we can to get the bracha. Because don't forget, it's for our benefit. This is our way of receiving the Baruch Shem's bracha. But the Kohen, don't worry, you're not losing by giving the bracha. Vakeret, the Gemara darshan the pasuk, bavarcha, mevarachecha. Kohen, that's mavarech, mizbarech. That's his way of getting the bracha. Now, does the mitzvah deraisa apply even today when we no longer have the Beis Hamikdash? That's a good question, because if you learn the sugyas in the Beis Hamikdash, there's a much more elaborate birchas kehanim. But we could say zil basar time. Even today in Laarets, even today bichlal, after the bayis were destroyed, there's still the same deraisa, because zil basar time, you'd need a bracha. What's also pashit, even in Laarets, there's also the mitzvah deraisa. In other words, Shemitah and the Trumas HaMaasers is fluyas v'aretz, but not Nisiyas Kapayim. It's the same deraisa even today after the bayis was destroyed, even in Laarets. Now a lot was been written about this, but I think it's sufficient to quote the Sharetzian in the end of, after Sivkot Kuf Lam Bazay and Lazayin and Sharetzian, he makes such very uncharacteristic. V'da, you should know, the Siyas Kapayim in Laarets is the deraisa. The Marketzia says it's not, but he made a mistake. Shaga. And he goes on to have a list. He forgot the Sifra, the Sifri, the Gemara and Saita, the Yushalmi, the Bavli and Chulin, Pashtei Dikra. He mamish makes like a non-issue. And the Chavetz Chaim Paskins, that Nesiyas Kapayim, even today in Laarets, is the same deraisa. Now, the next question is, does it apply every day? Or whenever you want? Maybe it's like Shchita, maybe it's like Nesiyas, like Shluach HaKan. So Pashtis will say again, Zil Basa Taima. If this is the Baruch Shem is mis'ava for, that we should get bracha, Kohanim and Yisrael should get the bracha, Why not think it's every single day? And the Emes Lashon HaPasuk doesn't make a chiluk. And indeed, the Rambam, in the Akdama to Hilchos Tefillah, he begins, there are two mitzvahs deraisa every day that we have in davening. One is davening, and the second one is Berchas Kahanim. Now the Rambam, Kedarka is Bekitza, but he's alluding to a big yisoid. The Siyas Kapayim is a din in Tefillah. You can't duchan when you have a minyan with a Kohen. It's part of Tefillah. Which of the brachas, as we know, avoida. That's why we say it by Ritzei. But the Rambam makes it for Dava Pashit. Tefillah and the Sikapayim is a daily mitzvah deraisa. The Chinuch writes it in Shinai and Ches. So now we know, so far, it's a deraisa, even today, every single day. But before we apply this Lamaisa, there's one very unique feature of Nesiyas Kapayim that makes it different than probably all other mitzvahs. And that is, when a Yid wakes up in the morning, he's zoicha, he has already a chiyuv of davening, wearing tefillin, and saying Krishma. But a Kohen wakes up in the morning, he does not have a chiyuv to duchan. What do I mean? Zok the Sefri in Nosai. How do you know that the shliach tzibur has to say some type of kriya, it's called, whether we say today kaihanim, but where do we know that you can't just duchan? A kohen can't get up and duchan. He has to be called to duchan. Koi savarchu es b'nei Yisroel emor lohem. And this is what the poets refer to as a kriya. You can't just duchan. The chazan, or not the chazan, the gabbai says kohanim, and then the kanim have to duchan. The Targum Unclus on this pasuk, Kedein Sefardim Yas Bnei Yisroel Katseim Alahoin. When you invite them to duchan, they have to duchan. So Tais Menachas Mem Dalet, he quotes, for some reason he refers to it as a Targum Bavli, that if there's no kriya, there's no chiyuv to duchan. We have to activate. I'll use a lamdish term. There has to be a chalois chiyuv. What's the chalois chiyuv? Not waking up in the morning, not being a kohen. The gabbai or the bal tefillah has to call him, and that's called the kriya. Shulchan Aruch Kuf Chav Ches Sif Beis writes as beferish, and the Mishnah spells out, without a kriya he can't duchan. So unlike tefillin and krishma, there has to be a chalois chiyuv. So now let's rethink our question. So what is Nesiyas Kapayim similar to? It's not similar to tefillin, not to davening. You know what it's like? I'll tell you. It's something like the mitzvah of tzitzis. Because when you wake up in the morning, there's no chiyuv tzitzis. What activates the chiyuv? Dal kanfos. So maybe the kriya for Nesiyas Kapayim is like the mitzvah of Dal kanfos. And that's a good assessment. But there's part two of that. Because please be careful. What do we find regarding tzitzis? The famous sugi menachas mem aleph. Even though a yid technically could live his life without wearing tzitzis once. He'll wear a robe and a frock or a kapekish or whatever he wants. No daled kanfos. He did nothing wrong. But says the Gemara, the Malach met Rav Katina and said, where's your tzitzis? He goes, what do you mean? I have no daled kanfos. True. But the fact you don't go and create a mitzvah, on our term you don't activate the mitzvah, there's a punishment b'idna rischa. Zok techem bet Moshe, and our sim and kuf chav ches sif cotton beis. He says, Taka, if there's no kriya, there's no chiyuv. But kohen Taira, make sure you duchan, make sure you go and find a place that there's a kriya. Because if not, there's an idna rischa. And it's interesting, I saw Tshuvas Min HaShamayim. That's one of the Bali HaToyser, Beinu Yankov, asked questions Min HaShamayim. And he got responses Min HaShamayim. In Siman Lamed Ches, he asked, there was a tzibur that never duchaned. Because no one called the Kohen, and there was no duchaning. Ali Oiver. So he writes, Eilu ve'eilu Oiver. Yisroel Oiver, because it's a bezoyin. Why don't you create this very much needed bracha? And the Kohen is in big trouble, because his source of bracha is mevarech mizbarech. If you're not duchaning, you're not getting a bracha. Now you notice he doesn't say he did an issa, because technically, if a tzibur never duchans their whole lives, then it didn't do an issa. There was no kriya. There's no bit laseh. But the avla is the lack of avas ha-mitzvahs, cheshivas ha-mitzvahs. And of course, on a personal level, we're losing terribly. We're not getting this source of exceptional bracha. So now we have a pretty good picture of Nesias Kapayim. First of all, it's the Raisa even today, even in Laarez. It's sort of like a mitzvah kiyumis, like tzitzis. The kriya activates it. If the Kohen doesn't go up after the kriya, he's mevatlan asay, gimel asay. But lemaisa, we have to go all out to create this chiyuv and make this mitzvah happen. So now let's try Be'ez Hashem to apply this lemaisa. Let's start with the question we began. A Kohen on the way home from Mussaf, he duchaned wonderfully. A tzibur needs a Kohen. Can they recruit him to duchan for him a second time? He davened already. So the chayra, if we follow our analogy, this should be like tzitzis. If you get a new beged, so make a bracha and put it on, gesundheit. And that's probably why the Gemara says, Menachos Chavches Amud Beis, where the Gemara says that duchaning, regarding a question about toys, I'm not going to get into it now, but shani hocha by duchan ila misramile tzibur achrina hadam mevarich. Therefore, kula yoyma zmanehu. In other words, a kohen has a chiyuv to duchan the whole day. Why? Because if a second tzibur calls him, he's allowed to go up. I said the wrong word. A kohen could duchan a whole day, because if they need him, he could duchan. So it's almost like tzitzis. He did it once, he's yaitza, but he could duchan a second time. Now you note the Gemara's lashon tzibur achrina, because let's say this tzibur, it was such a good bracha, let's do it again. That's Bal Taisif. It's one per tefillah. But he wants a duchan for a second tzibur, wonderful. It's very similar again to tzitzis. It may be similar also to sukkah. On Chol Hamoed no chiyuv to eat in the sukkah if you eat just snack, but you have breakfast, you make a bracha. You have lunch, you make another bracha. Each time you do is a new mitzvah. And the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Chav Ches says mamash like this: the kohen could duchan again a second time. The big question is, when he duchans a second time, does he also make a second bracha? Now let me clarify, you might find it confusing, because we talk about duchaning, we call it duchaning, which is really a little strange, because duchan means a stand. But okay, the bracha, it's called Nesias Kapayim or Birchas Kahanim. When the Gemara says Kohen could bench the tzibur a second time, you know what the Gemara means benching? Nesias Kapayim. So really, Birchas Kahanim means V'rach Hashem v'yishmerecha. So today we're going to say duchaning means saying the psukim. The bracha, means the Birchas HaMitzvahs. Asher Kitshanev G'doshay Salari. So the question is, Avada, the Gemara says he could bench the tzibur a second time. He could say V'rechacha. Does he make another bracha for this tzibur? Or once he said it once, you can't make a second time. So he'll duch without a bracha. So in Svara, we'll say, what's the shayla? Vivait, you're allowed to duchen a second time, so it's a package deal. So duchen like a mensch, get up, make a bracha, and duchen. However, and I found the Maimon Mordechai says he could make another bracha, just like if he puts on tefillin a second time, he makes another bracha, if there was a hefsek in between. It's mamash beautiful. It's a kiyumis whenever you do it. But what's even more beautiful, the Lavush in Siv Gimel has this shayla. He says, I'm not sure if he can make another bracha. Because maybe, he says, it's like lulav. Once you made a bracha on lulav once, you can make a bracha even on a different lulav. So maybe Nesias Kapayim is like lulav. Oh, that's Mamash Abu Chakira. He seemed to hold it's one per day per customer. You want to duchen again? Fine, no bracha. But the Marmintz in Siman Yud Beis, and the Chuvas, the Magen Avram, and Sivkat and Gimel, Pri Megadim, Kivega, all quote it, says, we're not chosh for the lavush. It seems to be almost illogical. If you're allowed to duchan, you have to make a bracha. Zok T'Sharet Tzion, in Sivkat and Pei Hey, Linyan bracha pashut, that he has to make a bracha each time, ve'ein paitze peh u'metzaftzef. Now, I would be tempted to bring a raya, the like levush, from a common occurrence in Eretz Yisroel that is shaykh to have 3 duchaning in one day. You're wondering, how could that be? Eretz is pashut, Yom Kippur. The minhagim in Eretz Yisroel, he duchan by every tefillah, he duchan by Shachris, Mussaf, and Nila. Zokmar means avad is a bracha every time. But the emes is not a raya. Because there, it's a new tefillah. So even though it's the same tzibur, but each tefillah is mechayiv a new bracha. Here we have a chiddush. The Kohen duchan by Mussaf in laarez. He's walking home to make kiddush. Oh, we need another Kohen. We need a Kohen. It's the same tefillah. Maybe taka, that's what the levush held. To duchan a second time in the same tefillah is unjustifiable. But the problem is that the Heilig Chassam Sofer and the Tshuvas in Archaim Siman Chav Beis is choishish lahalacha for this levush. And he says, if you're duchaning a new tefillah, you make a bracha. But you're making the same Mussaf for a different tzibur, you have to be choishish for the levush. You could duchan, but no bracha. So, when you see Chassam Sofer, you step back. But I must tell you that the Poskim, beginning with the Marmins, Magen Avram, I told you the Poskim quote, the like levush, which is like Chassam Sofer, the Chassam Sofer and the Tshuva, and the Chassam Sofer's Talmud, Mamshik, are also noita to make a bracha. So certainly a Kohen that has to duchan a second time for a different tzibur could make a bracha, like Mr. Bura says, pashit, he doesn't mention the Chassam Sofer, but it's the like Chassam Sofer and the like levush. Next question. The Kohen is walking home, and the tzibur needs him. He says, I'm sorry, my wife's waiting, I have to go home. If he decides not to help the tzibur, is it a bittul aseh? So the emphasis is it can't be a bittul aseh. There's no kriya. But it's more than that. Because Toises on Rosh Hashanah Daf Chav Chesed Amud Beis, we're speaking about Bal Toisif. Toises, the Gemara I mentioned earlier, Toises says, Mashma Bikan, that a Kohen could duchen a second time, but he's not mechuyev to. Because the deraisa, the chiyav, the bittul aseh is once a day. He could duchen a second time, but if he doesn't duchen, there's no bittul aseh. Now the Pri Megadim says it's a chiyav d'Rabbanan to do it a second time. Okay, yesh l'ram sivkat and gimel. But l'maisa, the poskim seem to say this unique feature of duchening. He could duchen a second time, but there's no chiyav. It's again similar to sukkah. He can eat a second time if he wants. He'll make another bracha, but he doesn't have to. Now, the Kohen should also think about binat mechaverei. The tzibur needs you, so try to accommodate them. But if he doesn't do it, we can't say he's doing an avla. There's no bittul aseh because it's one a day is a chiyav gomer. The Sharatzian by us that I mentioned, Sivkat and Pei Aleph, says a chiddush pella. It's so much so that it's once a day that if he's in Eretz Yisroel and he decides he doesn't want to duchen by Mussaf because he's duchen by Shachris already, he's not over. In Eretz Yisroel, every Shabbos, Shachris and Mussaf. If he doesn't want to duchen by Mussaf, he doesn't have to. Well, since he has to go out before, but it's one per day likuva. You could duchen 3 times with the bracha, that's fine. But likuva is once a day. Rav Sternbach in the Tshuvas, the Heilig Gimel Memvav, has an interesting ha'ara. There's a minig, a Heilig minig in Eretz Yisrael, that Kahanim go to the Kaisel for Chalamoid and Duchin, 300 plus Kahanim. He says it's very nice, but I wonder if it's so pashut. The Kohen is going to make another bracha after he duchened with his regular minyan, and he's doing what the Levush and the Chassam Sofer says is a bracha levatala. Why look for trouble? He says maybe that we saimach on the not saimach, most places you're allowed to, and it's a special schus, but you can't forget that we have to do things that are ois gehalten. And the assumption is that lahalacha at least we could be saimach when he duchens a second time, he's no chiyav, but he duchens with a bracha as well. Question: a kohen on a regular Yomtov did not yet duchen. unlike we said till now, a second time, this is the first time, but he finds it hard to duchan. He's old, he's feeble, it's hard to stand. Is there any way of him not duchaning and not being over, even though he didn't duchan yet at all today? Till now we spoke about a second time. Now I'm talking about the first time. So there's no doubt about it. There's no p'tur mitztayer by duchaning. Mitztayer is a specific p'tur only regarding sukkah, kain teduru. The question is there a way of avoiding being oivan asay? So we know the answer. Basically, if he's not there when they say kohanim, he's not being oiva. Tefillin, he has no option, because tefillin is a mitzvah kiyumis at least once a day. A mitzvah chiyuv is once a day. But duchaning, at the end of the day, if he finds it very hard, there would be a tzad to say, as long as you're not there when they call up kohanim, you weren't oivan the asay. Now, of course, as I told you earlier, the Chemet Moshe and Grada the Mishnah pastor like that, it says Beferish and Sivkot and Yud Beis, if the Kohen is mamish, it finds it hard to duchen, he's very weak, then don't stay in shul when they call up. But he says, if it's just, a little laziness, but you could do it, you better be careful of idna rischa. Just like if he doesn't wear dalet kanfais, he's oiva on idna rischa, duchening is not better. So the point is, it's sort of in between. A Kohen should exert himself. Takam. The Heilige Chafetz Chaim was a Kohen. He lived with Meirach Yomim. The Chafetz Chaim found it, B'Soif Yomah found it very challenging, but he exerted himself. He wanted to get this chashva mitzvah. So Kohen should do as much as he can. But if he finds he can't do it, simply put, we will say that if he's not there by the Kriyas HaKahanim, he's not oiva. Rav Ozna in Chelik Tes Chav Zayin was asked a bizarre question, where Rav had an issue Kahanim that just didn't duchen. They walked out. They beat the system, quote unquote. So someone showed Rav Ozna the Chsan Soifa held that such a Kohen, don't give him Kohen. If there's no other Kahanim, give a Tamei Chacham. Just skip him. You're not being a Kohen, you're not getting Kahuna. You're not getting the Schus of Aliyah. So Rav Ozna says, I'm surprised you could do that. Lamaisa, he's showing cheshivas, he walks out at least. He says, not to give him kohen with no other kohen, I'm worried about that. It's a Mussaf Tamiyah. He says, a Rav could do what he wants, but better give him starka Mussaf, Kahanim's reason name, tell him you better do it. But azoivai to say, because Lamaisa, he's not being oiva. If he walks out before the kriya, he taka avoided the chiyuv. But I also saw an interesting tshuva, and this really puts things in perspective for the rest of the shir. There's a tshuva, Zera Emes, one of the Gdolei Svara, the Rav Mitzrayim, Chelik Gimel Yud Beis, where a guy came to shul to watch davening. They're mazel, and either was Yomtov or even Shabbos, or even during the week, Sefardim duchan every day. They couldn't chase him out, but they were afraid to duchan in his presence. First of all, they don't want to give the guy the bracha, but also they're afraid he's going to make fun of it. So they decided they're not duchaning that day. They're going to skip the kriya, go straight to Chazar Shatz, and they asked his Hermes, was that the right thing to do? So he told him, well, you didn't have a kriya, right? So there was no issa. Okay. Is there a problem of idna rischa? No, because you have a very valid reason. You're afraid to duchen in the presence of a guy. And he proves it. Because in Shulchan Aruch there's a shita, it's not the minhag rather, but there's such a shita, that a single person should not duchen. Because shar b'lai isha, shar b'lai simcha. Where does it say that? It's no Gemara. The teretz is, if you feel that you can't duchen, and you have a good reason not to duchen, there's no idna rischa. Because you didn't call up the kohen. We'll soon see, he says, that's the minhag in chutz laretz. We don't duchen every day. There's a chiyuv. Teretz without a kriya, there's no chiyuv. So he makes the following point, I think, is the yesod that we have to use. That if there's no kriya, or the kohen walks out, there's no bittul asay. The only thing is, where's your chashivas? Idna rischa. If you have a reason that overrides idna rischa, you're okay. So that's what he says, and he said you did right. Now, just for the record, the Chida and Yosef Oimitz, in Siman Ayin, also Sefardim, in Sivkot and Beis, he said, I heard of someone that paskin, you can't duchen in the presence of a guy. The there's no such makar, duchan. Okay, so Lamaisi, if there's a guy in the shul, sometimes it happens, an older person comes to the shul with a guy she'ait, and the guy sits in the back. You don't want to chase him out. So the meaning is we duchan with a guy in the audience, so to speak. But the yesod that we see from the Zera Emes is very important. That if there's no kriya, there's no chiyuv. He has to walk out, we'll soon see. But make sure that you keep in mind that if there's no good reason to miss the duchaning, chas v'shalom, that's idna risk. Oh, so lamaisa, what do we do about a kohen that finds it very hard to duchan? So if he can't exert himself, we'll say the following: avoid the chiyuv. Now, what does that mean? So let me tell you, the Yerushalmi says beferish, I should mention, in brachas hey ois dalid, both Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi and Rabbi Loza were kahanim who found it impossible to duchan. They walked out. What do they do? So this, we come to another unique feature of duchaning, and that's the ability to simply walk out before the kriya. But what does that mean, walk out? That means when they say kahanim, walk out before, and right after kahanim, run back because the kohen wants to get the bracha. Not really. Zok the Trumas Hadesh and Chelik Beis Siman Chav Beis. Theoretically, if he's not there by the word kahanim and comes right back for the duchaning, he's okay. But there's a technical problem. There's an issue that when a kohen does something that puts a question mark on his validity as a kohen, that's called pagam kahuna. Now, isn't it strange? The kohen is with the Yisroelim by the duchaning. Why aren't you duchaning? No one knows that because he feels very shvach and he can't duchan. So Zok Shem Sadeshen, there's takin you weren't over. As long as you were out when they said kahanim, you're okay. The problem is psul yichus, pagam kuna. So he says the kohen has no choice but to stay outside until after they finish duchaning. Not else the mitzvah, else the chashash of pagam. And this is Gepaskin in Sif Daled and Shulchan Aruch. But I want to just say, the kohen should not feel bad. He's not losing the bracha. Because as the Gemara says in the B'chaba Paskin Sif Chav Daled, if someone cannot come to duchaning, he's included in the bracha als amshe besados. He tried. It's good to mention this grada because it happens always, and it causes a very painful Yomtov scenario when the women try very hard to get the children ready to go for duchaning, and they come just in time to hear the singing of the Kaddish after duchaning. And they feel terrible. So let me say, if they tried, then they get the same bracha, they shouldn't feel bad. And if they can't even try because they have too many pitzlach at home, don't feel bad either. It's the same amshe b'sadais, machabetz, gemara, and saita. So as long as the thing is you long to get the bracha, you're included in the bracha. But Rabbi say, let me be clear, a kohen that cannot duch for whatever reason should walk out from before. Actually, we'll get to it in a moment. Walk out before the kriya and come back after duchaning. Now, the bracha that sleeps late in Eretz Yisrael, anybody who sleeps late in Eretz Yisrael, this is not going to work for him. In fact, he wasn't there. Because then we have an idna riska, why don't you make the mitzvah happen? Now, there is a different part of the unique feature of duchaning, and that's based on Soit Lamed Ches Lamed Beis, the Mechab Ben Siv Ches quotes it, that the minhag is that, actually based on a posik, that the kohen starts going towards the duchan by ritzei. Beginning of ritzei, but anytime in ritzei. If he doesn't go up by ritzei, he can't duchan. So the truth is, technically, that's another eitzah for kohen. He could just stay by his seat and wait till moedim. Then, even if they call kahanim, he can't go up because he didn't go up by ritzei. Moedim is too late. But we run into a problem of course, of pagam. And stam, somehow, even without the kriya b'diavad, without oika b'diavad, he could go up if they call him. So, let's be really clear. A kohen that for some reason can't duchan should walk out before ritzei, stay in the hall, stay outside until after the end of duchaning. This way you're safe. As I state the Magen Avram, Siv Cotton Dalid, Mr. Bur Yud Beis quotes it. The safest way is walk out before ritzei and come back after the end of duchaning. Now, a Kohen that is so weak that physically cannot stand on his feet, so he is an easier case. Because the Gemara in Sot Lamed Ches darshan the pasuk Koisevaruchu ba'amida, and the Gemara darshan in the pasuk. Now, what that means is a Kohen that cannot stand on his feet is not chayiv or not allowed to duchan. He's not like a Kohen that's just shvach, could do it, but he finds it hard. He can't, he's not mechuyev. He's like Yisroel, l'chol dava. What's the nafkamina? Theoretically, he could stay in shul. Doesn't have to walk out before Ritzei or before Kehanim, because the Kriya cannot activate him as a Chiyah because he can't do it. But we understand that there's a problem of Pagam. Plus, people are looking at him and they're distracted. We have to avoid distraction. Saying, hey, why is he duchaning? They start thinking and they end up missing the whole bracha. So that's why the minhag is he walks out. Again, he walks out before Ritzei and comes back after duchaning, and he's included als am shebesadis. But amida is ma'akiv. The Mishnah adds in Sifkat Nun Aleph, leaning on a stender is not good enough, because in this regard smicha ki yeshiva. It's like he's sitting. B'megadim says if they call up a kohen who could lean on the stender, even b'diavad he shouldn't go up, because Zok to B'megadim the end of Kuf Chav Ches, smicha is like yeshiva. So he has to be able to stand the entire duchaning. Now the Poskim add he could sit down in between the words, especially certainly during the singing, but to stand by every word until v'yasem lecha shalom. But that's a different scenario, because there he's not chayiv, so he doesn't have to have he doesn't have to have the running out. Just he's doing it al pagam. Rather, the same is true a kohen that for some reason can't pick up his hands. He can't make nisiyas kapayim. Laloch he's not chayiv. He doesn't have to walk out make it in, but the minhag is he walks out from before the Ritzei until after duchaning. Again, if he can keep his hands up at least by the words, so then he could do it like everybody else. But the point is that we have to differentiate between someone who's not mechuyev or someone who finds it hard to do. The next question is negeya to Rav Klal Yisrael. And that basically is why in most places in Laerz, except for Sefardim, why don't we duchan every single day? When it's clear, there's no chilek Eretz Yisrael and Laerz. So this could be a share for itself. We've got one spoke about it. But to make a long story short, there are a number of reasons that are really not satisfying. I have to be honest. The Ramah says we're not besimcha. I know many people are very besimcha. And Eretz Yisrael, you are besimcha. Ramah says bitl malacha, tercha the tzibur, we don't have time to duchan. Many Yidden know how to find time to do what's right. Some say it's a chashash yichus. So in Eretz Yisrael, you do have more yichus. The Chassam Sofer in Siman Chav Gimel says because we don't daven properly, so it's felt in avoida. Again, so what about Eretz Yisrael? Some say because they don't toivel and they're not from Tumas Keri. Some say because Goyim come to shul. You want to see a beautiful tshuva in Beis Ephraim. In Siman Vav, he discusses all the various points. But at the end of the day, the real reason we don't duchan in Eretz Yisrael, in Laerz, because the version doesn't want us to. And I'll tell you a davened moed. This is recorded in the Tshuvas, Meishav Davad, and Netziv, and others, but it's a true story that really happened. Mamish. The Goyen decided he's going to stop learning, which for him was like Mesiras Nefesh, travel the world and bring back duchaning every single day. He decided tomorrow he's going to start. And that night he was arrested by the Goyim and thrown into jail. It was a libel, of course. Nothing to do with the duchaning, but he was thrown into jail. So he took that as a sign that he's not going to change things. Now, usually the Goyim was Moisei Nefesh for every nuance. He didn't say, well, the Yitzhar is trying, I'm going to fight back. The Goyim, B'Raiv Chachamasai, decided it's a mess min Hashemayim. His Talmud of Chaim Volozhina, again, this is quoted in the Tshuvas Meishav Davach Beis Kufdal, who's an Einikol of the Netziv, heard it from his Shver, of Chaim's son. He also decided he's going to start duchaning in Volozhin al Kapanim. Tomorrow was time to duchen. That night there was a fire that burnt down half of Volozhin, including the shul where he's supposed to duchen, and he retracted. Zok the Netziv and that Shuva, these two Gedolim, Rov is Bainanu, Sheyesh b'zeh eze dava soidi, b'sisri hashpos ha-bracha yored ayde berachas kahanim b'chutz laretz, ve'ein itanu yadeya adma. Somehow, Eretz Yisrael, chutz laretz, is not able to generate enough kedusha to allow duchaning. It's like, you don't have enough electricity to run a big unit. But this way the Nitziv understood. We don't have enough kedusha for this heilige Nesias Kapayim. The Shulchan in Sif Samach Daled writes, two Gedolei Olam try to do it. There's really no reason we don't do it, but if they tried, and this is Lashon, which is priceless, Kilu Baskel Yotza Shlalaniach Lanu Lisa Kapayim B'chol Shana Kula, except for Yomtov. Is that more satisfying than the other reasons? But minei uminei testaya milsa. That's the reason why Yidden don't duchan in Roiv, Tfutzas Yisroel, and Chutz Laretz. Now, but the end of the day, the real reason, justification perhaps is the better word, Zok the Maril, one of the Rishonim, who records this minhag, don't forget the minhag not to duchan in the Chutz Laretz is quoted in Rishonim. Zok the Maril in the Tshuva, in Simin, in Chadash, is Chaf Aleph, because we don't make a Kriya. So we're back to step one. If there's no Kriya, there's no Chalais Chiyav. So you're not doing an Issa. You're only not doing the Asay. Okay. Is there in the Rischa? Chas v'sholem. Fakert. The minute we got the message, we're not duchening. So, plus, don't be too depressed. We are the classical Am Shebesadais. We are getting the bracha of Achenu B'nai Yisroel that are duchening every day. Some people, they ask a Kohen who duchens every day to have him in mind. No, say a shame. But you don't have to do that. We are the real Am Shebesadais. We're following Gedolei Yisroel, and we don't duchen. There are more writes it in Sif Mem Dalid, minhagim b'chol medinas elu, that we don't duchen except for Yomtov. So B'nai Yisrael yotzim b'yad Ramah, don't worry. Why do Sefardim duchen even in Chutz Laretz? Because the Beis Yosef in the end of Kuf Chav Ches said that's the minhag of Sefardim. Why in Eretz Yisrael they do duchen? Because there's enough kedusha in Eretz Yisrael. But don't forget, no one's being mevatel and asay l'chol hadayis. It's back to our Yisod. We don't have the activation of the chiyuv. Now, here's the chiddush that I must say, till I learned the sugya, I would not think like this. Now, let's talk about the Shal Debache Esmi. He's a Ashkenazi. He wants to go to a Yad Yosef here in Flatbush and duchen every single day. So we would say, oh, Chacham Lev Yikach Mitzvahs. Wonderful, Tavalav Bracha. Zogt Alicha Shloima in Vav Beis, Rabbi Yashiv in the Tzion Halacha, Amitz Taf Yotes, and Rav Sternbuch in Chelik Zayin Simon Yotes, don't go and duchen there. Because the minhag is not to duchen in Chutz Laretz. How could you go duchen keneged your minhag? They're duchening, so they're Sefardim. But that's how much they were kamat oika duchening in Chutz Laretz. Now, if he wants to go and duchen without a bracha, like he asked me, so I said, well, what are you going to do? I'll tell a kohen that's making a bracha, have me in mind for the bracha. I says, oh, so that's okay. Because we all know the Beis Halevi that you can't do duchening aydei shemei koina. Because you have to have koil ram. Okay, so that's questionable. But a birchas ha-mitzvahs you could do by listening to a kohen. But if you ask me, should you do it? I don't know if you have to do it, If we don't duchen, the Chavetz Chaim didn't have Svar, the Sheminyanim in Radin, but the point is that we have no mitzvah, we have no chiyuv in Chutz Laretz. The Mishnah Halach in Chelik Ches, Simon Tezvav, he says so weit, if someone got up and said Kohanim on a regular Tuesday morning with Kohanim in Shul and in Chutz Laretz, they shouldn't duchen. Because there's no kriya. It's not a kriya, there's no kriya if there's no chiyuv. So Lamaisa, that seems to be the minhag. We don't go running elsewhere. Now, if he wants to go and not make a bracha, I can't say it's wrong. But one thing I will say, when sometimes you see Yisraelim and Chutz Laretz go to a Svardish place to get the bracha, no, getting a bracha is wonderful. It's a valid bracha. But we can't say it's wrong to, if a kohen doesn't go, to find at all a way to duchen even without a bracha. Interesting question. A Kohen from America that goes to Eretz Yisrael. What does he do? Weekdays and Shabbos, and Shabbos he duchan twice. So the answer is Pashat, Avadi duchans. Twice. Yomtov duchan twice. He has a bargain. Because the only problem is the Kedushas Haaretz is missing a Chutz Laretz. It's not your psul because you're a ben Chutz Laretz. So he duchans even twice. Question: a Ashkenazi Kohen who's a ben Eretz Yisrael, lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he's here now for a few days. What could he do? So he zicha can't duchan in our minyanim because there's no kriya. Could he go duchan by Sefardim? So I'm not so sure it's so pashit, because for him he can't duchan in Chutz Laretz. But then again, he always duchans in Eretz Yisrael, but now it's Chutz Laretz. So that's up to him. You know, if he goes there, he could say, I'm a ben Eretz Yisrael, but I'm not so sure it works. But one thing I'll tell you, a fascinating shaila, it's going to be Negeya in a few weeks on Thursday, Chav Beis Nissen. Let's say a Kohen from Eretz Yisrael. You have a son, you have not son, we're going to get an Eidim from Eretz Yisrael. And he's here for Pesach. So what does he do for duchaning every day? He misses one of the duchaning. And Eretz Yisrael duchans twice a day. Here he'll duchan only once. By Mussaf, okay. But the question is, when it comes Thursday, which for us is Yomtov Achrein, for him is Yisru Chag. He's playing along because he wants to daven with the minyan, he wants to hear, but he's vachadik. Where's he? Can he duchan by Mussaf? Because for him, there's no Mussaf. Shachas he could duchan, but you're not going to let him. So as early as the Shari Tshuva and Tov Tzadik Vav Sif Cotton Dalet says, many shittas hold he can't duchan. There is no duchaning for him on Mussaf on Yisru Chag. Now, there are those that hold he could, and Ramosha in Chelik Hey, beautiful tshuva, Simon Lamed Zayin, as a Merdikataina. He says, who cares? There's no chiyuv for him. As long as it's a tzibur that has a chiyuv and it's part of their avoida, why can he duchan with a bracha? Varay is Dr. Ramosha. Let's say a Kohen is walking home after he duchaned on Yomtov. Another tzibur called him. He could duchan for them with a bracha. He has no longer a chiyuv because he already was yotz's chiyuv. The teretz is he's here to service his clientele. If they have a chiyuv, he could duchan for them. But it's not a perfect raya, because there at least he has a chiyuv on this day to duchan once. So a second time is okay. And that's taka why the place will say such a kohen should not duchan with a bracha, because he has no chiyuv on Mussaf. Question: a minyan of Bnei Eretz Yisrael who here on Chutz Laretz, they have their own minyan. So he asked the stipler in Aruch Shebeinu Aleph Samach Zayin, could they duchan every single day minhagim Eretz Yisrael? So the stipler said they're allowed to, which is a chiddush to me, because there's no kedusha sa'aretz to Chutz Laretz. And taka the Rabbi Yashiv and Yisa Ish, that's his Talmud's Tshuva Sefer and Gimel Amadalit, he says you can't duchan for two reasons. It's a shinui minig in Chutz Laretz, and also where do you have the kedusha to duchan? So that would be zicha a pretty big chiddush. But the good news is that the fact is that no one ever said how could an Ashkenazi duchan by Sefardim. It's a different havara. Very noticeable. You know, we try so hard to avoid any distractions. We cover, the Kanim cover their hands and the Yisroel cover their eyes. Imagine you're in a Sephardish place, all of a sudden you hear someone saying with a Hasidish havara or a Litvish havara. It should be surprising and distracting. But the Heintige place will say, Baruch Hashem, today there's such an achdus, Sefardim and Ashkenazim, it's not even surprising. I'm in a yeshiva, we have Ashkenazim, we have Sefardim, and Sefardim have Ashkenazim. So at least that's not the problem, the fact that it's a different havara, even though it used to be like sort of a surprise, and that would be a distraction, that's not an issue. Another interesting point that now you'll understand at least why you see different minhagim, an avel toich shana for avel imoy or toich shloishim for other relatives, does he duchan when there's duchaning? In other words, in Eretz Yisrael every day, in Chutz Laretz on Yomtov. So the emes is there is an avel is chayiv and called Torah Kula, and that's why the Mechab and Sif Mem Gimel says an avel duchans every single day like everybody else. It's only a Mordechai, the Beis Yosef quotes a Mordechai, that says since duchaning needs simcha, and an avel is not besimcha, he should not duchan. But Zok the Beis Yosef, I don't know any reason for this. And I think the biggest kasha is the Gemara speaks about a Kohen that can't stand or can't raise his hands. It doesn't say an avel. They had avelim in those days. And that's why the Mechaber holds, that's the minig, Sefardim, actually it's the minig in Eretz Yisroel, period, that an avel duchans. Don't forget, they duchan every day. Hayala al das, that an avel for a whole year doesn't daven for the Yom because he can't duchan. If he's a Kohen, like what do you do? Eretz is Eretz Yisroel, duchaning is every single day, even avelim. It's only the Ramah that writes v'chein hagim dinas elu that an avel doesn't duchan. The Goyin quotes a Zoya that you have to be besimcha, and an avel's not besimcha. The question is, how do you come along with your minig, albeit it's a minig of Mordechai, but it's a minig, and oike 3 assays, the Teretz is chas v'shalom. The avel that will not duchan cannot stay in shul. If they call me, he has to go up. He'll have to walk out, like we said, from before Ritzei until after duchaning. But the Mishnah Berurah said beferish. Listen to this in Kuf Nun Zayin. If they called him, if he didn't walk out, and he forgot, and he went up by Ritzei, and they thought, oh, he's an avel, and after they called him, he can't walk out because a minig is not mevatel and issa. It's only if he circumvents the issa by using the patent of Nesiyas Kapayim, he walks out. More so says the Mishnah Berurah, let's say there's no other kohen but the avel. Or there's one kohen, but we'll soon see he's supposed to have 2 kohanim for the deraisa. In these cases, the kohen should duchan and override his minig. Because here, the chi of duchaning for the tzibur tells him, follow ikad din and stay there. Rather, the Maril Diskin in Kuf Tzadik Tes in the Chuvas, he says, how could you say that because there's a lack of simcha, you don't duchan? Maybe in Eretz Yisrael that every day it's hard to make simcha every day. But on Chutz Laretz, on Yomtov, you have simcha anyhow. You have to aveilusduchan. He says, you got to duchan on Yomtov. That's not the minig. But definitely if he has to duchan, let him do it b'simcha. Katan, also a big sugya, but katanim is a gemara, the they should duchan. And that's the minig by some places. Most places a katan does not duchan. Why not? Because pashit, because he's not a bar chiyuva. The question is, for those that the minig is a katan doesn't duchan, does the katan have to go out from Ritzei until after duchaning? So, grada, it's not so pashit. The Paiskim say, Yeshua Yakov said in Sif Katan Tezvav, since really he is mechuyev, but opposites a minig, he should walk out from the beginning till the end. But that's not the minig at all, and the pshat seems to be, since our minig became the halacha, and the kri is not intended for katanim, he doesn't have to walk out. Question, interesting question. There are some days that there are different minhagim regarding duchaning. L'mashal, do you duchan on Hoshana Rabbah? Do you duchan on Shabbos Chol HaMoyed? So we no one's machriya minhagim because each tzibur does his own minig. But one thing we'll say, those that don't duchan l'mashal on Hoshana Rabbah don't have to worry about bittul aseh or idna rischa because you're following your minig and there's no kriya. If you end up in a place that's duchaning and that's not your minig, l'mashal Hoshana Rabbah, you're davening place that is duchaning, you have one of two choices: either duchan with them or walk out from before Ritzei until after duchaning. One kohen is not pashut, he's mechuyev. The Gemara says, "Emor lohem," Zok Gemara in Soita Lam B'Ches, "Emor lohem" indicates you have to have 2 kohanim. Tois is both in Menachos Mem Dalet and in Soita says midrabanan. All agree there's a chiyuv even one kohen to duchan, but midaraisa you need 2 kohanim. Now, what's our minig? When there's 2 kohanim or more, we say koyanim. When there's only 1 kohen, we don't say anything. Where's the kriya? Teretz is, if there's no chiyuv deraisa, then you don't need a kriya. But at the end of the day, the minig is by 1 kohen we do duchan. We try to make 2. We even pull an avel to duchan with the kohen. But 1 kohen has a mitzvah, at least midrabanan. Says the Badi HaShulchan, the Tzais HaShulchan, Badi HaShulchan Chav Gimel Mem Gimel, but that kohen that duchan, because he only had 1 kohen, and he's walking home and he hears another tzibur duchaning, he should duchan with them, because this will have a mitzvah deraisa. He missed a deraisa, so try to recreate a deraisa and duchan again with another tzibur. Our question, when a kohen drank a revius of grape juice, is fascinating, because the Gemara says, and also Saita Lamed Ches, and it's also in Shulchan Aruch Sif Lamed Ches, incidentally, that a kohen that's a shasu yayin cannot duchan. Just like he can't do avoida, he can't duchan. The mechaber's lashon is, he doesn't have to be shikar to be potter. A revius of wine, bevas achas, he can't duchan. Zok the Magen Avram, a chiddush nifla. Let's say a kohen drank schnapps, and he says even if he's shikar, but he could duchan. Because it's not a din in being shikar, it's a din in psol avoid, the yayin. He says no, but if he's shikar, he shouldn't duchan. But if he drank a lot and he's able to oimeth me'amelech, he could duchan. After that, Zok the Magen Avram, but nearly he can't, if he drank a revius of yayin megita grape juice, he can't duchan. Because since it's yayin l'chol dava, and the Gabi Nazir, he can't drink even grape juice, he's a shasu yayin. He's not shikar, it's not totally in shikar. Most poskim on the page, Machzah Shekel, which Yisroel all ask, but doesn't make sense. If it doesn't have the quality of wine, doesn't have alcohol, how does it passel? And the Mishnah Taka paskins the like of Magen Avram. Rav Yaman Zilba has two tshuvas in his Nidbru. He says our grape juice that can't even ferment. Even the Magen Avram agrees that he could duchen after he drank a revius of more or grape juice. So lachatchila, the meaning I think by Kanim is they don't make kiddush at all, and they don't drink even grape juice. Even if they have to, for some reason they have to eat, they'll have someone else a kiddush. If the Ma'isa Kohen has to make kiddush, it's probably better to make on grape juice than schnapps, because some people don't make on kiddush and schnapps b'chlal, even by day. Some are machmir rather, some kind of a machmir, they won't even drink milk before duchening, because milk has a certain quality of mishaker. I once said, but maybe that's why we don't duchen in chutz laretz. Imagine davening and learning every morning without your coffee. Because if you're a kohen, you can't even drink milk and coffee. But no doubt about it, schnapps is not as, grape juice today is not as bad. As far as the other shal I mentioned, they had no kohen for shachris. They wanted to duchen simchas Torah by mincha. The other kohen was there. So raise a pella. This is the worst idea. Because did you ever wonder, in Eretz Yisroel, duchen shachris, Mussaf, Ne'ilah, why not mincha? Teretz a shikras. Yom Kippur, there's no shikras, lay plug. So here, the duchen on simchas Torah is the biggest lay plug I could imagine. And let me leave you, last but not least, with the fascinating shayla. You'll take it home for Simchas Shabbos, Simchas Yomtov. Try to remember it for Yomtov. Here's the question. A tzibur davened, and they duchen. It could be in Eretz Yisroel, chutz laretz, no chiluk. But after they finished, someone was ma'ira that they left out Yalav Yavai. The Shatz left out Yalav Yavai. And the Shatz says, I thought so, but no one yelled at me, so I kept on going. Bekitza, he davened with duchening, and they were not yoitze, because he left out something important, Mashav Ruach, whatever it is. Now, do you have to also repeat Nesiyas Kapayim? Now the tzibur is getting nervous. Another Shatz, but duchening also. So the emphasis mitzad echad, this is the worst problem. Because here you're duchening in the same tefillah for the same tzibur. And that all agree is Baal Toisav l'chayr. But then again, you weren't yoitze with the davening. But then again, wait a second. Who cares if you were yoitze or not? The ik is you have to have a duchening in a avodah, which you had. Zoktik Tzais HaShulchan, in Taka I mentioned earlier, he says, you know what it's like? If someone drank the third kais, and after, on Pesach that is, and after he finished the third kais, he realized he didn't say Yalav Yavai in benching. He has to bench over. But you don't have to drink another kais. Hailu Chudei. So his feeling is you do not have to make another Nesiyas Kapayim. It was B'soich a tefillah. But the problem is it wasn't the kosher tefillah. It's Kil you didn't daven. Zok Tahar Tzvi, a beautiful halacha l'maisa in Siman Samachalev. He says, you know what this reminds me of? The famous machlokes Taisvis and Chacham Provincia, when you daven and you left out an haskara. Is the pshat you didn't daven at all? Start again. Or you did daven, but you didn't say the haskara. So there are many nafkaminas. but this is another nafkamina. Because if you hold you didn't daven at all, so you're holding by Gal Yisroel, so you have to duchan again. But if you hold that you daven, but you did say an askara, there's no chiyuv in the seeds combined for askara. But the emes is basically even like the sheets you didn't daven at all. But the davening, you did say nisis kapayim in the context of avoida, and taka the minig is not to repeat nisis kapayim. The best thing is to hold cup. Rabbi, let me just tell you, we're making a chasana tomorrow night, Bez Hashem, here in Vishnitz, the chuppah is 7:30, Bez Hashem. I didn't send an invitation to anybody, but you're all invited. Halavai, we should take and make simchas. But simchas, going to thank you for coming. Good and talk to you. Okay, just the chazar we learned today about Hashem. First of all, the nature of Nisis Kapayim is pretty much unique. It's not a mitzvah kiyumis like tefillin and krishma. It's more like a mitzvah it's not a mitzvah chiyuv, I'm sorry, like krishma and tefillin. It's more like a mitzvah that's kiyumis, that you have to create. How do you create it? By a kriya and being oika by ritzei. It is like tzitzis, that each time you do it is a different mitzvah. Laimi by a different tefillah is a different mitzvah, l'chol hadayis, but even a different tzibur for the same tefillah, we pass, you can make another bracha because it's a mitzvah for each time the Kohen duchans when there's a chiyuv. There's a mitzvah on the Kohen and on the Yisroel. Either it's a mitzvah or he's a messiah to make sure it happens. Even bisman hazeh, even a chutz laretz. Chutz laretz, for some reason, like a baskel rang out, only duchan on Yomtov, but there's a mitzvah on chutz laretz, no different than Eretz Yisroel. The unique concept of duchaning is you have to activate it, you have to make it chal with a kriya, and basically, even if he never has a kriya, he didn't do an issa, but there's the idna rischa, which is certainly a major problem. A person can do, a kohen could duchan again for a different tzibur with a bracha. All agrees when it's different tefillah like Yom Kippur or in Eretz every Shabbos and Yomtov, then all agree a second bracha is said because it's a new chiyuv. If a kohen finds it really very hard and he's convinced there's no idna rischa, so let him walk out from before ritzei until after the finishing of the duchaning. But he should make an effort to do it as much as possible. At least if he could do it by the words and sit down in between, that's also good. Unlike, as we said earlier, the concept of kriya, there's also, he has to be oike by ritzei. If someone cannot duchen or cannot come to duchening, he's part of amshe b'sadais, he shouldn't worry about that. If a person is unable to stand or raise his hands, so that kohen is potter and really doesn't have to walk out, except for the issue of pagam. The hezbollah why in chutz laretz we don't duchen is because that's the Ratzon Hashem, and we follow Ratzon Hashem. What's the reasons? That's questionable. But the emphasis is a baskel rang out that bnei chutz laretz Ashkenazim don't duchen in chutz laretz. Should have been chutz laretz duchen with a bracha by Sefardim. Not to, maybe without a bracha, but certainly with a bracha is contrary to minig hamakom. A kohen, an Yisroel Ashkenazi that wants to go to get bracha by Sefardim, gesund to hate. An Ashkenazi that goes to Eretz Yisroel, duchans kaminig Eretz Yisroel. A Kohen ben Eretz Yisroel comes to chutz laretz. It's questionable, but I think they do try to find a way to duchen because they feel that's their minig, so they don't want to lose it. A minyan of bnei Eretz Yisroel and chutz laretz, as machlokes, they could duchen. The challenging question, Yomtov Sheni, for a Kohen ben Eretz Yisroel, could he duchen? For him, is not a Mussaf. But we also said a bnei chutz laretz and Eretz Yisroel should duchen even twice a day. Don't worry. The Eretz Yisroel, the cotton, the minig is most places doesn't duchen, doesn't have to go out. An oval that doesn't duchen should go out. A kohen should avoid any drink, but lamaisa, if he drank grape juice or schnapps, he could duchen. And the last question, it seems, if they made a mistake, you do repeat the chazar sashatz, but not the nisis kapayim.